How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 5000, and in this video, we're going to talk about the next few winter storms that are expected to move through the Midwest as well as the Northeast, where now we do have blizzard warnings issued for many states throughout the Midwest, as within the next 48 hours, we should see a pretty significant blizzard move through. However, that's not the only winter storm we're going to take a look at in this video. Let's first start this video by taking a look at a forecast that's a bit more in the long-term future, which would happen approximately 5 days from now, right around the early part of next week, where we do have the potential of a winter storm moving through the northern Midwest as well as the Northeast, including impacting the more populated areas of New England, and with the snowfall going as far south as Hartford. The Boston area as well could get involved, as we do see a decent amount of cold air just ahead of this low pressure system. Now, take a look at the forecast hour. We're still 138 hours out, and you might be thinking that that would make the forecast more uncertain. Of course, when we're talking about a forecast that's beyond the 5-day mark. And while that would be true, the thing that's making me a bit more confident with this forecast is that the European model is also showing a very identical forecast when it comes to the track of this low pressure system, as well as where exactly the snow will accumulate throughout the Northeast, where we see the rain snow line in a very similar position as what the GFS model is stating. Now, if this trend were to continue, where we see both of these computer models showing nearly the exact same forecast, this would make me inclined to believe that a scenario like this would occur, where we would see a significant winter storm for portions of New England and upstate New York, and even as far south as northern Pennsylvania, and of course the Midwest, the northern Midwest would also get involved. So from the starting point of the storm system, the European model is expecting mainly light isolated snow showers over North Dakota and Minnesota. So in those areas, I wouldn't expect much snow as of right now. Of course, that could change if this storm system were to encounter a little bit more instability. We see in the GFS model scenario, it does expect the snowfall to be a little bit more widespread. However, we need to also take the GFS model scenario with a grain of salt, because its resolution is lower, which means that you're in any given precipitation event, the GFS model tends to be look a little bit more widespread when it comes to the precipitation compared to the European model. So while the area of snowfall might seem large in the GFS model scenario, it's likely smaller than what you see right here, because just because the GFS model has a lower resolution compared to what you'd expect from a regular radar, and even compared to what the European model is forecasting. So it should be less snowfall than this, at least when it comes to how widespread it is, but you still should expect mainly around 1 to 3 inches of snowfall for your Sunday morning commute for a lot of these areas in northern Minnesota and North Dakota and into northern Michigan and Wisconsin as well. But we do see the snowfall does become a little bit more consolidated by the time this approaches the Midwest. That's when we'll see the instability begin to rise. We're going to see a ridge develop just to the east of this storm system, and that'll allow the area of snowfall to expand as it continues to head further eastward, which is what the European model is also agreeing on as well, where we could see more snowfall than you think, such as in northern Michigan. You could expect 3 to 6 inches of snowfall in a scenario like this. And then for much of the Northeast, at least for places like upstate New York and the northern portions of New England, I'll say this will dub maybe 3 to 6 inches of snowfall. And of course, the areas for southward, maybe as far south as Boston and northern Connecticut, maybe you could receive an inch of snow out of this. And there's still that possibility that rain snow line could move further southward. It really just all depends on how strong the ridging will be. It seems like both the computer models are showing a good amount of agreement, so I do believe this will be the most likely scenario. So definitely be prepared right over New England as well as much of the northern Midwest. And we do see that snowfall will eventually head into Maine, and it should become quite heavy at this point once we really get to see the instability rise quite a bit by the time this approaches New England. So the heaviest of snowfall could be right over Maine and northern New Hampshire, where you could expect over a half of a foot of snow. So you definitely want to be prepared for that. Let's take a look at the snowfall forecast from the GFS model to get a better idea of what to expect from this snowstorm that would happen by late next week. So I'm taking a look at that. Like I said, mainly around 1 to 3 inches of snowfall over portions of North Dakota and northern Minnesota. It does show more than this, but I'd be willing to bet that the GFS model is overestimating it a little bit, especially when we assume that the resolution is a bit lower in the GFS model scenario. So it tends to overestimate the snowfall accumulation just a bit. So you should expect more so around 3 to 5 inches in northern Minnesota. And then for northern Michigan, you should expect maybe another 3 to 6 inches. And for much of the Northeast, you should expect mainly around 3 to 6 inches of snowfall. But of course, it should be more than that in portions of Maine, where the snowfall should be could really be heavy at times once the instability ramps up. So definitely pay close attention to this. I'll keep you guys updated if we do see any significant changes when it comes to this forecasts. So definitely stay tuned for more updates. But I think a scenario like this will most likely occur by early next week. So in terms of what could happen even beyond that point of early next week's snowstorm, what I find interesting is a pattern that both the GFS model and the European model want to develop by the time we approach next week, which would potentially promote more winter storms moving through the Midwest and Northeast, which could mean that winter might not be over for you guys just yet. Because if we were to see the storm system pass through, a key thing you might notice is that the northwesterly flow will stick around associated with this low pressure system and will sort of disconnect from the main portion of the jet stream, creating an upper level pattern that will create just enough of a pressure gradient to bring that cooler air further southward, and that could create a trajectory where clipper systems could move southward into the Midwest and Northeast, which is what the GFS model is exactly forecasting. We do see a small clipper system move through the Midwest by the time we approach the March 27th timeframe, around that time period, and then continuing to move even more forward. Now this, of course, you need to take it with a big grain of salt. It is almost a guess at this point by how far long term this forecast is getting. We do see a major winter storm move through the Midwest and into the Northeast just before we enter the April time frame. So, of course, I wouldn't necessarily show you guys this since it's so far out in the future, but what I find interesting is that the European model is also showing somewhat of a similar scenario where we do see eventually a clipper system will move through. It does move a lot further northward than the GFS model, so we're still going to definitely need to keep tabs on that. But what's interesting is that behind that clipper system, it's developing a winter storm in nearly a fairly similar scenario. Of course, it's not exactly the same. The GFS model is taking much more snowfall, but the European model is still taking somewhat of a trough moving through by the time we approach March 31st. That could bring that potential snowfall over Northeast. So I'll keep you guys updated once we get a bit more certainty with the forecast, but at least keep tabs on this over the next few days, or I should say weeks at this point, by how far out I'm going at. So definitely keep that in mind. Now, let's go a little bit more into a more manageable forecast hour, because we've been going very much in the long-term future, and it's not very accurate when we go that far out to be real with you guys. So taking a look at something that is almost certain at this point. We do have a blizzard that's expected to impact the Midwest, and both the computer models are both forecasting a fairly similar trajectory. The rain snow line is at a very similar position, so at this point the forecast is highly certain. This isn't going to be one of those scenarios where you need to wait and see over the Midwest. If you're under a blizzard warning or any sort of other winter weather advisory or warning, you need to prepare accordingly, because the impacts are certain at this point, or at least as near certain as you could ask for when it comes to a weather forecast. So you definitely need to prepare in a lot of these areas. And then what's interesting is that we could maybe see some snowfall associated with this in the Northeast on the backside of this storm system. However, it likely will be fairly isolated, mainly isolated over the higher elevations of the interior Northeast. So this wouldn't necessarily impact a large population of people, but still something to keep in mind by the time we approach a Friday time frame. And temperatures should get much colder as well compared to what we've been experiencing in the Northeast. So taking a look at the Futurecast radar to show you guys when you should expect impacts when it comes to snowfall. So for Denver, Colorado, snow showers should be moving out by the very early morning hours on Wednesday. But we do see by that point the snowfall does become more consolidated. We see the snowfall move in to Nebraska and Kansas right around Wednesday morning, and continuing to move forward. By the early afternoon time frame, the snowfall has moved into Wisconsin, southeastern Minnesota, northwestern Iowa, and even into Nebraska and Kansas. You're still getting snowfall, and then continuing to move forward. This snowfall should end for the Iowa area, I'll say Wednesday night, but the damage will already be done where you could receive anywhere between 8 to 12 inches of snowfall right over places like Des Moines, Iowa, and a little bit further northwest than that. Or anywhere between 5 to 8 inches of snow. And then we do see the heavy snowfall over Wisconsin by Wednesday night before it eventually does begin to wind down. But we could see Chicago also get involved with accumulating snowfall. We could expect anywhere between 1 to 3 inches of snowfall right over Thursday morning. So in the Chicago area, you need to be aware of this as well. And here's a look at the snowfall forecast over the Midwest. Like I said, in places like Rochester, Minnesota, you should expect 8 to 12 inches of snowfall. Northwestern Iowa should expect a large area of anywhere between 5 to 8 to 8 to 12 inches of snowfall. Omaha could get involved with 3 to 5 inches of snowfall. Northern Kansas as well, around 3 to 5 inches, or potentially a little bit more than 5 inches. Even Green Bay and, like I said, Chicago, you might get involved with accumulating snowfall, maybe around an inch of snow in Green Bay. And in Chicago, it's going to be a fairly close forecast, maybe just a dusting right around the Chicago area. Won't be much, but if you're still hoping for any sort of snowfall, this might be your opportunity to get it right over Chicago. So definitely be prepared for this over much of the Midwest, as well as wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour with how strong this winter storm will be. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content like this, and I hope you guys all have a great day.